What's up guys, this is Koko and TCG back with a different style of video. Long story short, I spent a large portion of my free time, the little that I do have these last couple of weeks, actually tracking the tournament data of a couple of reoccurring tournament circuits, and I wanted to show off that data today between what we are actually seeing being played and what's actually winning, what's getting top 4, what's getting top 8s. Before I start, a special thanks to the QK Tournament Discord and Wolf the Legend for donating event data so that way a video like this could be possible. With that being said though guys, at the end of the day, part of this is my own opinion, and of course if the deck you really like playing or the clan you really enjoy using isn't very well reflected on the tier list and top 4s and top 8s in these events, or just isn't played very much, you can still play whatever you want. At the end of the day, we play this game because we enjoy it. But hopefully a video like this helps guide you to make better decisions when preparing for tournaments, and if you choose to bring a less represented deck, can help you either bring counter matchups in the form of your other options, or just, first we're going to talk about the QK bi-weekly participation stats. These stats were taken from 289 deck submissions, guys. That's a lot of individual deck submissions from event to event. So if we take a look here, the top 5 most played decks in the QK League between our casuals and our bi-weeklies is Erads at 21%, Spike Brothers at 12%, and then Aquaforce, Jewel Knights, and Golds kind of in the same ballpark of that 10 percentile range area. After that, you're going to see a large decrease in play from pretty much anything else in the meta. You're still going to see stuff like Ethics Plow. Celestials are getting really popular. Everyone's really starting to fine-tune their Celestial list, and we're actually seeing that it has some pretty good matchups against a lot of these more explosive decks because you're able to find PGs very easy. You have the 5 heals in most of those builds, so it's very tanky. And it also makes really big columns with the help of their new Vanguard and new staple Seracule, or if you like crits then you're playing Helm. It's just lots of options. It's a very strong deck, and it's really starting to push Angels to the forefront of the meta. We have Ethics Plow still around. Some people don't have as much faith in Ethics Plow. They feel like it's a little too high rolly, but it actually does quite well in most of these events. It's just with the Ashley season being over, Aquaforce coming up, and Gold just being very reliable, it's really hard to beat those participation numbers, but Ethics Plow is still performing just as well as Golds, Jewel Knights, and Aquaforce in most events. Next, we're going to talk about the top 4 stats. Basically how I have divvied it up is if an event tends to be a little bit smaller, like around no more than 20 people, max 24, then I'm only going to show the top 4 and only going to count top 4 because otherwise I feel like I'm bringing in too much of the bracket into top cut. But if the event that I'm showing is fairly big, closer to 30 people, then I will obviously show a nice top 8 cut split for you guys. So this is the top 4 percentile of like what's made into top 4 for the month of December for the QK casuals and bi-weeklies. If you take a look here, we have really big numbers. The dynamic 5, as I guess I'm going to call them for this month: Erads, Spikes, Jewel Knights, Aquaforce, and Golds in that exact order, followed by Ethics Plow and Celestials, which really feels to be that like next level of good. And then you have your Dotes, your Sooks. People are really starting to optimize Liberators. You're still seeing Dungry around for those who didn't fully get all their pieces for Erads. It's the next best option. General Gyros actually being very well performing in the QK casuals and bi-weeklies. Surprisingly, someone just keeps bringing it. They keep topping with it. They keep winning with it. You'll love to see it. And then of course this gray 5%, just like on the other pie chart for participation, is just those one-off decks, and it helps clean up the pie chart. If you want the stats for those, please let me know in the comments, and when I make these videos in the future, I can go ahead and just do the full thing. But hopefully as we continue the series, we can kind of refine it as we go. Next, we're going to talk about my weekly, the Koko Cup Weekly. I host this event every Sunday, and this also does foil into the QK League, but I really started making the split between event stats because the Koko Cup only counts clan names. I don't want to have to look through deck submissions and punish someone for changing one trigger or changing one grade 1, so I just tell them to bring the clan name. With that being said though, we have a 19% participation rate of Erads, 17% participation rate of spikes, followed by golds, Aqua Force, and Celestial actually kind of creeping up. Koko Cup has been known to be a testing ground for really weird concepts. A lot of people tend to bring those off picks. That's why you see a much larger percent of BT in this event. You're just not going to see it. It really depends on where you're playing and which community you're playing in. For those lower index, as far as how many people are playing it goes. I guess something to point out here is that if you take a look, Zerakill actually sneaking in as the 5th most popular deck in the Koko Cup Weekly, finally surpassing Ethics Blau. Ethics Blau has been one of the most popular and well-performing decks in the Koko Cup Weekly since it has released. And if I included a lot of those November placements, it would have actually surpassed Erads and Spike Brothers, and how many of which clan is getting into top 4. Here is the top 4 stats. So 25% of the decks we're seeing in top 4 for the Koko Cup Weekly this month in December is spikes, followed by Ethics Blau. Like I said earlier, Ethics Blau just performs really well here. I don't know, you don't see it as high anywhere else, but in the Koko Cup Weekly, Ethics Blau just continues to do well. We have Eradicators and in general Narukami, but I'll let you know 90% of those lists are Erads. We have a 13% split going to golds. Really important to note that early on, or at least a couple weeks ago, people weren't really sure how they wanted to play their Liberators. We're starting to see Liberators really refine their list now, and everyone has pretty much found the Liberators list that really fits their playstyle, which means I'd say about a third of these gold players that's showing up in the Koko Cup Weekly are actually playing Liberators instead of Ezel. And of course, you have the one-ofs like the Sook, the Zerakill, the Reiji, and we did actually have a Zeal end up in top 4 one week, which was actually really cool. But a very healthy split here. I know a lot of people, if you're just playing ranked or if you're not really too locked in with the competitive scene, it may feel like you're only finding Erads. But even if in a multi-deck format you're seeing a lot of Erads, there is still a lot of other things being splashed in the meta, and so it helps, at least from a tournament perspective, knowing that not everything is Erads, even though sometimes it feels like that. Next, we're gonna go into the top 4, or at least for the Zero circuit, it's top 8 stats. So for top 8, a little bit over 25%, so about 30% of the decks have been Erads. So not quite 1 in every 5, not quite 1 in every 4, kind of in between. You're gonna see an Erads list show up in top 4 for the circuit, followed by spikes, Aqua Force. We actually see a large spike here, and Celestials kind of taking the helm here. And if you take a look here, I think an important number to note is looking at the other top 4 conversion rate list, we see a lot more Jewel Knights and Golds that are making it. But here for the circuit, not as much, more 1-ofs or 2-ofs here. This 1-of here is a Gyros, and this 1-of here is a Shadow Paladin list. We have 2 Liberators, so Liberators and Golds actually doing equally well here. Don't know if it's luck of the draw or just high rolling into good matchups, but it's showing that Liberators can do well. But you know, we still see Ethics Blau performing fairly well. Angels, like I said, is a deck to be looking out for in the future. But these are the results. Next, it's time to do the tier list. Alright, so next we're going to talk about my tier list for set 10. I actually did a one-shot with my viewers on Twitch, and it was actually fairly similar to what it is now, but I did make some changes based off of the data and some of my own opinions on decks right now in the meta. For the YouTubers, the YouTube fans that don't go to my Twitch channel, this will be the first time you guys are seeing me do a tier list on YouTube, which is a PogU. And going forward, we will break down every tier list for Vanguard Zero using the 5 Bs of the meta, being broken, barely, balanced, bad, and meme. Meme is more for the Twitch viewers, just so I can kind of clown and joke some of the oddball picks in the meta. But typically for YouTube, I'll try to keep it clean. But obviously, some things in meme could be like more up on the tier list, and some things in meme can also be more lower on the tier list, right? Starting off in broken tier, or like the tier 1, the cream of the crop, we have the dynamic 5 of the meta being Erad, Spikes, Aquas, Jewel Knights, and Gold Paladin. I think that these are like just some of the best performing decks. I think that these 3 here could easily go in broken. It just depends on the week. More specifically, Ethics Blau and Sook. But these decks are just feel like they're cut above the rest. They're a little bit faster. They do a little bit more. They all have access to retire or ways to get through people's defensive options. I think the two hard spots here is Erads #1, Spikes #2. Most of the time you're going to see Erads being the most played, which pretty much means they're usually going to be the best performing deck. Spikes are also really good. They're not quite an Eradicators, but a good bad in break right turn going into the Deadly Emperor can absolutely melt any deck if you've played your early game properly. And then of course Golds and Jewel Knights kind of flip-flop depending on the week, based on results, based on participation, but I really feel like it's probably like this, and I think Jewel Knights are just higher than Golds because they're newer. People are still figuring out the list, and we're going to see a optimization that's going to suit the global server more than it did for the JP server. Sometimes what works in JP isn't exactly what works for us in global, but I think, you know, Jewel Knights, very good. Gold's very good. Next in Barely, we have, or what I would call Barely is like Fringe, that tier 1.5. It's competitive. You can bring it to an event. And some of the balance stuff also goes up here, but they're so on the cusp, I actually just dropped them down. So we have Zeracule being kind of that newcomer, bringing Angels from what felt like was a pretty low tier deck, or just not very high performing deck, all the way up here. It's very defensive, and it finds PGs easy. Having 5 heals and finding PGs easy means you have a really good chance of fighting against decks like Erads and Spike Brothers, which are the two most played decks in the meta, or especially those gold players with their Blaster Blade Spirits, aka Thing 1 and Thing 2, Thing 2 being Blaster Dark Spirit, or Jewel Knights using Gantz a lot. Just finding PGs is so helpful against all 5 of these decks and pretty much anything on the tier list outside of anything OTT. It's so polarizing. Zeracule makes massive columns, and now you don't need to rely on triggers to really set up a really good multi-attack turn with your Medical Gunner Hermiaries, which is just insane. It's just Zeracule is hard carrying the deck to be a real threat in the meta. Ethics Blau, depending on the day, you know, depends on how well they're gonna do, but people are playing it. It's good. You've seen people, or at least I've seen people, take someone from 2 to 6 on a good break ride turn in this deck. I've seen people also whiff pieces and not be able to play the game. So it really depends on the luck of the draw, but typically you see this deck pop off. Y'all need to stop sleeping on Sook. It's still a real thing. I think next month it drops a little. You know, Dote is very scary. It's still playable, but right now it's just Silent Tom is such a strong win con. I think it's a strong card, but I think every deck at this point pretty much has its own unique way to finish games, and if it doesn't, that's probably why it's not up here. But yeah, Silent Tom's an amazing finisher. Tsukiyomi Counterblast 2 to draw 2 cards, still busted. I think that these decks here, Shadows, Dungaree, and Dote kind of swap depending on the week. I think Shadows is way less played. Its play percentages is more in the balanced tier, but its performance is more in the Barely tier. It's a good deck. It has a pretty good tempo against Erads, and the retire can be really helpful. The PBO crit is really helpful, and it can really punish a deck like Erads, but it's still not cream of the crop. It's just good. It's quality. Next, I have Dote here. It kind of swaps, but I think Dote Restand just ages a lot better with the inclusion of the new PGs, and I think that makes a huge difference in the meta. But I mean, they're a little slow. Let's be honest, they're a little slow. That new Murakumo support, it's kind of high rolly. We've already seen it top in one of the events, and we're seeing people play it. It's pretty fun. The break ride's really broken, allows you to get more pieces on board pretty easily. And of course, Coral being probably the best performing BT list is just, it got more pieces. Prisms actually foil very well into the Coral list, giving you now a 9k return to the hand draw, so you don't need to run Rio anymore. You can actually start running cards that build good columns, so it's easier to build columns now. You still draw really well. It's just, do you draw into a Morikawa hand of all grade 3s, or are you finding PGs on those draw skills in those top decks? That's the Barely tier, and like these probably swap depending on the week, but I think Coral's a little bit better than this. I think it's more like this. Dungaree's pretty good, but because Erads are so popular, you're not going to see it as much. It's just one of those decks that starter Dandan gets punished by Linchus and Saishins if they're playing the older Narukami starter. So it's good, but this punishes it. If we go to balanced tier, right, we got Polaris, Lukier, Pentagonal, we have MLB down here as well. We have Liberators in the same ballpark. We have Sanctuary Guard, the high roll, and then General Gyros, Break Ride with the Mega Blast, Vermilion, and then of course we have like Genesis, Fromage, which I'll talk about, Shadow Duke, which is honestly the better Duke variant, but I personally don't like Duke as much. If you guys think Duke should be higher, tell me where Duke should be in this tier list, because I'm a little biased there. And then of course Reiji and DP, which I'll also get to. So talking about the top of balanced, it's not an Narukami list, it's Pale Moon. I think Pale Moon is pretty decent, but and most of the deck isn't very good, and it can kind of struggle to build columns if you're not riding your Golden Beast Tamer. But your Dreamy Fortress kind of punishes every deck in the meta except for Erads and Dote, I guess. Yeah, Erads and Dote are really the only hard counters, and Aqua Force as an extension has a pretty good matchup. But outside of those three decks, really good. It's just Erads and Aqua Force are played at such a high number right now, and you know, Dotes are still lurking around. They're waiting for their new support. So playing Pale Moon, bring something else just in case if you can, because you either got to high roll into good matchups and, you know, hit heals and PGs, or just, you know, not bring it. MLB, the crit doesn't age as well. With the new PGs, you push them to 5, and then these very explosive Break Ride decks proceed to Break Ride and then push you from whatever damage you're at to lethal, because you decided to suck up your Blaster Blade and your Blaster Dark. Now you have no intercepts. And yeah, they're at 5, but now you have no defense. So unless you have like 4 PGs in your hand, you're going to lose. It just feels bad. New PGs hurt this deck a lot. Polaris, pretty cool. Cola Bear, pretty cool, but it's just not what it used to be. Power creep is a thing. The restand ages a lot better than MLB. I think Pentagonal Magus, it's OTT, it's got crit, it's relaxing to play, but it's high rolly. Same thing with Liberators, but I mean, MLB is still a deck, it's somewhere in here, right? I think these three kind of swap depending on how your matchups are looking, how your luck is looking during your event, right? I think Sanctuary Guard is up here, General Gyros Break Ride is up here. They are high rolly, but they do have a lot of crit pressure and can make the slower decks kind of buckle, and they can also surprise a lot of the top tier decks and kind of push for surprise lethal when they don't have enough PGs. You can also get some cheesy wins, because honestly, if you're playing a deck like these two, people just might not respect your plays. Just simply put, because it's not Erads, it's not Spikes, it's not the Dynamic 5, right? Vermilion is still Narukami. You still have intercept negators. You can clear a whole board, which is really useful. Genesis, very high rolly. Don't soul charge your heals. Don't soul charge your PGs, I think is kind of the name of the game. But it's just a good deck. It's good. It's not amazing. I think Fortuna moves it much closer to here, and between here, it makes it much better. But right now, until we get that new support, I'm not one of those Armistice stands. If you really hate Aqua Force, or if the event you're entering has a lot of Aqua Force, and you have the extra deck submission space to bring a tech, bring Battle Sisters if you have it. Fromage, pretty hard counters Diamantes and Basil, and really forces them to go into early glories, which you draw pretty well in this deck, so you should be able to find PGs, so they can burn all their counterblasts with glory, and you'll just still be sitting pretty, ready to tom them. Shadow Duke, I just don't think Duke is good right now. Ethics Blau is the new Duke, to be honest. It's the next best restand deck, and if you have Ethics Blau, you shouldn't be playing Shadow Duke in my opinion. But it's still fairly fast, and sometimes if you high roll, you can just steal games. Reiji and DP, let's talk about Reiji. Reiji's pretty good, guys. I'm not gonna lie, but it's a little slow. It's like 1 to 2 turns slow. Maybe like a set ago, it was a lot better, but they really need the support. They really need the boost, because right now it's just not cutting it. But with the bikes and with the clan in general, Dark Irregulars just having a lot of flexibility with their builds, it's one of those decks that while it may not be the most played or the best performing, you can cater it to your kind of bracket. If you need more retire, play more retire. If you need more crit, play more crit. So it's one of those decks that you can kind of like build to beat your bracket. And of course, I have DP at the bottom of balance because Laurel is really good. It helps you filter into heals and having consistent ways to find crit. It's kind of unga bunga, but with new PGs, it hurts it a little bit. But at least it can find heals fairly consistently and, you know, potentially high roll against these guys. But in general, we're not seeing, like, these 4 decks, we're really not seeing them at all. Finally, in bad tier, we have Cocytus, we have Zeal, we have Indra, Prisms, and Gold Duke. Gold Duke, I just don't like it. I'd rather just play Shadow Duke. Prisms, they can high roll. I've actually seen and played against and faced. I've also commentated some games with some really good Prism lists. It's not that. Indra, if you're playing a best of 1 format, let's be honest, playing a crit heavy deck might just win you the event, might win you a couple of rounds, might get you top cut, because Indra's pretty fast and it's kind of scary. It's still Erads, guys. Well, not Erads. It's still Narukami, guys, right? Zeal, we're seeing it, which is the reason why I have it on the tier list, but it's bad. Only saving grace is it can't out-retire Erads and I guess some of the stuff up here, but it doesn't matter because after that you're pretty much getting beat. And yeah, I don't think I need to say anything. But anyways, guys, these are my thoughts on the meta right now. If you think something should be in a different place, I'm going to post my tier list link on my Twitter, and you guys can go there and you guys can make your own list and show me what you think the list should be on Twitter, or let me know if you think something should be in a different spot in the comments below. But anyways, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This video took a very long time to make, so any support, any criticism, like, you know, constructive criticism to make a video like this better is really appreciated. Guys, this is Koko and TCG signing off.